Hi, as mentioned, Chris Riley. I run the data transfer initiative. Kat called me the founder, which I go back and forth on. It was created before me, but I'm the founding executive director. And I've tried to describe to people that I'm not legally the founder because it was created before me. And I describe that I've built everything except the legal entity. And they said, no, Chris, you're the founder. So anyway, I wear that with pride, but try to bring a little bit of humility into it as well. Our mission at the Data Transfer Initiative is to build a safe and simple ecosystem for data portability to help people transfer their data. So, from a scope perspective, there's a lot of different ways to transfer data. Our focus is on people, individual people moving their data. That's complex enough. What is your data? How do we define the lines? How do you make sure that you get what you need from the business that you're working with? What we don't work on are enterprise level bulk data transfers in particular. That's its own mess, its own space. We find that the world of individuals transferring their own data, because of its strong connection to fundamental rights, is one where we can have the most impact and do the most good. Let me move on. I'll explain more of our work streams in a little bit, but let me talk about data portability first. As I said, this is grounded in fundamental human rights. Your data is yours, and part of that means you need to be able to take it where you want it to be. And that process should be easy, it should be secure, and it should work. It should move what you need it to move so that you don't feel trapped working with any single business or online service. This is what we've been built for as an organization. It's an agenda that over the past 3 years, I have yet to find anybody who says that's a bad idea, right? Everyone looks at this and says, oh, yeah, of course, this is great. And then they turn the corner and they focus on their other priorities, right? This has always been everyone's third to ninth priority. And I think the very reason and the vision for the creation of DTI as an organization is that we will be the ones for whom it is our first. For us, data portability is our first priority. We will be the ones who will cajole companies to the table as needed, translate with regulators and companies. For even with regulators, this is rarely, if ever, their first impulse. We will be the ones to try to make things happen and to keep balls from dropping in the process of trying to deliver portability. We work with big tech. We were founded by big tech. We exist because people working at Google, Apple, and Meta decided that if they were going to be forced to do data portability by regulation, at least they should work to make sure that it is done right and that it is done in service of users so that they are not cornered by regulatory imperatives to build solutions that users don't want to use or are intimidated by. They wanted to make sure that they could try to build some credibility and some reputation with their users in the course of developing data portability. So they created us as an independent nonprofit. We are not a trade association, so we do not work to the benefit of these companies, but we do work with them, and we believe that they are capable of doing good sometimes in this direction when properly guided. We build tools with them, tools to help people transfer their data. We build policies in the sense of internal policies on what kinds of data goes into those tools, as well as public policies. We work a lot with governments, particularly the European Union and the United Kingdom more recently, because those are the two that, in our experience, have pushed the envelope the furthest to try to get the tech sector companies to make more data available and on better terms. We have worked with others. We've worked with Australia a bit. I have looked into, my team and I have looked into the possibility of doing more work in Africa. Nigeria has some very interesting privacy laws in place. We've also looked at India and Korea and Japan. There's possibility for more, but we're a very small team. So I don't know how far we'll be able to go beyond Europe, at least in the next year. But our ambition is indeed global, as are the tools that we build. So this is just a little bit more of what I'm going to walk through, and I'm going to keep this at a high level. And this deck, of course, you're welcome to. I don't know if Kat has already sent it around or not, but for sure, you're welcome to it and welcome to talk about it. I want to take a step back and say, why is this a problem? Why is this something that we need to invest in and that we need to do more with. And maybe you all are familiar with this, and this is not something that you need to hear. But certainly, many people think, oh, well, why would I need to move my data, or why can't I do it already? These are hypothetical user stories. We have not done research to the broad public, have not had the resources of the vision to do that in a compelling and methodologically sound way. But there are a lot of ways in which the current landscape does not let people move their data easily. Some people just feel trapped. They don't know that there is any way to move their data whatsoever. And as a result, they feel like they have to keep using the same service forever because that's where their pictures are. That's where their emails are. That's where their memories are. Others understand that they should be able to separate their data from that service, but can't figure out how to do it. They can't figure out how to get it out of the service that's holding it, or they can't figure out how to get it into the service that they want to use it with. Others can't download it. So the original version of data portability was set up by, well, I don't want to go in two different versions of mixed history. The first technical iteration of portability was, here, user, you can download all your data. Then you figure out what to do with it. That works fine if you have a desktop computer and are on a fiber internet connection. If not, it doesn't work fine. So we have had to build all of our technical paradigms and implementations to consider the possibility that users cannot, or at the very least should not have to, download all of their data in order to transfer it. Now let's step into a little bit more technical. Okay, maybe we've gotten through all of these points. Maybe we've gotten services that will transfer data on your behalf without you having to download it. Maybe that breaks. Maybe the service that you want to use doesn't let you put the data in. Or maybe even the service providers say they transfer your data, but not all of it's included. The more you dig into the data portability problem space, the harder it gets. Something we've been learning a lot over the past few years. We have a particular technical model that we use to implement this. I'm not going to go into it in great depth because it's not the only solution. It's just one that we have found that works well in some circumstances. So particularly for large service providers to large service providers, things like Apple Photos and Google Photos, even Dropbox, Facebook, these companies are fairly sophisticated, and we should be able to expect them to put in a bit of effort to make sure that transfer tools work well. The starting point problem is if you have N companies and you want to build an ecosystem that lets you transfer data between any two of them, do you have to build a separate tool between any two companies in order to facilitate that? That's what we call the N squared problem, because there are roughly N squared, N times N, pairwise connections amongst N companies. We don't think that should be necessary, and we think that by agreeing on a shared way of representing each type of data, you can build a hub and spoke model like the one in the picture here, so that any company can transfer data in a more standardized, more interoperable way. And that way you don't have that same scaling problem, at least from the technical perspective, from the interoperability perspective. There's some downsides to this. You have to run a shared code base. It's a little bit complicated. But for some types of transfers, we do build, support, and offer this particular type of tool. So there are two main technical projects that we have at DTI. This is one of them. And again, it really works best for larger enterprise scale organizations just because of the complexity of the code base. I say that in part for organizational history because we were created with this tool as our core of operations. However, I want to emphasize this is not the only way to solve this problem.
Can I just ask a clarifying question, Chris?
Please.
Since you
Yeah.
had said that you're not designed for enterprise, but this example is for an enterprise model for a larger organization, not for an individual use.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Enterprise is being repurposed as a word in that case. When I say enterprise data transfers, I don't mean data transfers between enterprises, all data transfers between enterprises. I mean bulk transfer of many users' data through some sort of contract or negotiated agreement, the kind of thing that happens in the ad backend industry. We do support users at enterprises, users at big services who choose to transfer their data. So getting back to this idea that our scope is any user anywhere who wants to transfer their data, regardless of the company, including enterprises, we build for that. So if you are a user at Facebook or at Apple or at Google or at Dropbox, and you have pictures and you want to be able to transfer those somewhere, that's what we build for, and that's what we service for. The back end world where Facebook may offer access to a large number of pictures to an advertiser to target ads specifically based on what they can find in pictures, that we don't deal with. So the only distinction there is who's initiating the data transfer. Is it a person or is it a company? If it's a person, we work with it. If it's a company, we don't. But thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
This is what our tool looks like in production. So it is in practice operational by Facebook, Google, and Apple in particular as three of the services that were involved with us from our very beginning. So these services offer lots of different ways for you to transfer your data. But one of them, it runs on our toolkit and is supported by us. So if you go into Facebook's Transfer Your Information tool, you can transfer your photos, your posts, some of your events to a few different services. If you go into Google Takeout, it depends on where you are in the world, but you may have a few different ways to transfer your data. They're still going to try to encourage you to download it because that's something that they support very well. But there are ways that you can use our hub and spoke toolkit to transfer some of your content to some destination. Same with Apple. These screenshots are a little bit old, so it may look a little bit different, but I don't think it has changed a lot because this is a sufficiently back-end code base that things are slower in their evolution. So these tools operate against a backdrop of laws and regulations. Again, I have worked mostly in Europe and a little bit in the US, so this list could be a lot longer if we talk about relevant portability provisions in any of the GDPR-inspired data protection laws that have been adopted around the world. If we talked about the portability provisions in place in Japan, there would be a little bit more depth to it. But I see the most movement in industry from the laws that are passed in Europe, and therefore that has been my focus. The General Data Protection Regulation, you're probably all quite familiar with at this point, fundamental privacy law, and included a user data right to download and, in theory at least, ask companies to transfer your data. And it's been adopted and cloned in many places around the world. An early law that was proposed but not finalized that I worked with a lot personally in a former job hat was called the Access Act. And that phrase can mean a few different things. The Access Act, as it was introduced in 2019 by US Senators Warner, Hawley, and Blumenthal, was a tech industry focused portability and interoperability law that would have made large US tech companies offer data portability and support interoperability of data and similar types with each other. I'm still 7 years later disappointed that that law didn't pass because I do think it would have changed the future of technology in significant, interesting, and largely positive ways. However, it didn't, and now we have the current U.S. situation, which is its own world. Anyway, back to Europe. The Digital Markets Act was passed a few years ago, and it is a pro-competition, open access type legal framework. It created a status called gatekeepers that are not monopolists in the traditional antitrust sense, but essentially means these are large companies that have the potential to make it very difficult for other businesses to succeed. And one way in which they do that is by holding on to data and not making it available and not letting people take their data with them. So one of the obligations in the Digital Markets Act was a more aggressive version of data portability rights than what was passed in the GDPR. The consequence of that is that the eight designated gatekeepers all have to set up what are known as DPAPIs colloquially, data portability access, I'm forgetting what the P is in API. You all are probably familiar with API, access point interface or something like that, I think. Anyway, these companies have to set up these interfaces so that any third-party business can send them a request and say, hey, my user wants to transfer their data from your service to my service. It's a way of making it easier and simpler and faster to engage in personal data transfers, all directed and shaped by the European Union's laws, now and on a going forward basis. And we're starting to see a similar effort develop in the United Kingdom around smart data. Longer rabbit hole, I won't go into the depths of that, but we're seeing some inspired by the DMA work in the UK as well. One place where we've been putting a lot of work in lately is how to establish trust in this ecosystem. So even if you have these tools in place, even if you've got the technology to let a user transfer their data from one company to another, if a new company comes in, I like to joke Joe's photo sharing garage, right? Let's imagine a brand new company comes in and offers to do very cool things with your photos. All you have to do is transfer all of your personal photos to them right now, and then they will do cool things for you. Um, how do we know that they're a legitimate entity? This is the internet. This isn't a traditional financial infrastructure or some other world where there are loops that people have to go through in order to create a business. Anybody can create an internet business anytime without having to go through any sort of prior government hurdles in many countries. Um, and we like that. Part of the good thing about the internet is how easy it is to create a new technology and a new business. But there's a trust consequence to that. If a Facebook user wants to transfer their photos to some totally new service, or a user is creating to-do lists and they want to transfer their data to and from Google Docs to make that easier, or an iTunes user wants to transfer their playlist somewhere else, how do we protect the user from fraudulent behavior, from uh, questionable things that these businesses might do? How do we balance empowering people to make free choices online with protecting them from fraud and from abuse, which, after all, are quite plentiful? This is something that technology doesn't fix. It takes something more than that. But this is a big deal. We don't necessarily know that the destination of your personal data is who they say they are. We don't know that that company is securing their data. We don't know if they're working for a foreign government. We have no idea what they're going to do. We don't know if they have security and privacy practices in place. And we don't know if it puts the original place holding the data at legal risk or you as a user. So what we've got right now are companies setting up inconsistent requirements. So company A will say, hey, Joe's photo sharing garage, before I let our mutual user transfer their data to you, you have to upload your privacy policy. You have to give us your security report. You have to provide us other information. Different companies put different requirements, which creates new kinds of friction in the data portability landscape. And some amount of friction we need. But the more that we can streamline that, the more that we can make it consistent, the better things will be, the easier it will be for developers, and the easier ultimately it will be for users to make their data go where they want it to, while being able to trust that process. So we're building some solutions for this as well. There's some technical bits to this too, but the more important part is the trust mechanisms that are going into it. Anyone can come to us at DTI now and apply to be in our registry. We will work with them confidentially, quietly, to make sure to review their privacy policies, to look at their security practices and credentials, to look at their consent mechanisms, to look at how they tell the user what it is that they want to do with their data. And then we will, if they reach our thresholds, we'll give them a public listing and say, yes, this company has reached our level 1 or level 2 trust certification. These kinds of certification processes exist in a lot of different industries. This is not a novel circumstance. What's distinct for us in this approach is that we are a nonprofit. We are incentive aligned to try to make more data flow. So we want to help people coming to our registry get there. Yet we also want to make sure that it's trustworthy. So we have, I think, a pretty balanced perspective on this, and a pretty pretty good credibility in engaging what is and is not appropriate in this world. Right now, we have one large company that is already building their verification. It's Meta. I can be public about it. Meta, if a third-party developer in Europe in particular applies to Meta to try to get access to their portability interfaces, Meta first sends them to us, and we put them into our registry and we vet them. And we're talking to two other companies about trying to get them into a similar place. And we have, I want to say, somewhere between 6 and 10 companies, smaller companies in our registry that are going through our processes and getting to different levels. I should give the URL for that. It's I'll just pop it in the chat really quickly in case anybody wants to play around with it. It's at dtreg.org. It's also a place where we think we can help grow researcher access to data. If you imagine researchers going into the same interface, proving themselves to be trustworthy, I want them to be able to use the same interfaces that companies can use so that users can donate their data to researchers to help them study online behavior and the use of technology and help it be healthier. We're still in pilot phase. We're still doing things fairly manually, but we hope for a world in the not too distant future where maybe we can get some grants from the United Kingdom or other sources to really scale this up and make it a bit more automated, a bit faster, a bit easier. But we really believe that this is a long-term component of the vision for an infrastructure that will let this be easy as email. Email doesn't have quite the same scale of trust problems as data portability. So we've had to invent new approaches and new models for this kind of infrastructure. But I think that we can get there. And the registry in particular is gaining traction with not just companies, but government actors as well as an important part of this ecosystem. I have to talk a little bit about AI. AI is big everywhere in every conversation. I've been interested in AI and portability for more than 2 years now. And my vision for this is to make sure that we don't allow silos of data to be reconstructed within AI. As people use ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude more and more complex ways, there's a risk that they'll be stuck. That even if Anthropic triples their prices, they don't have a choice. They'll just have to pay them. Even if they change their terms and give themselves rights to do whatever they want to with your personal data, that you won't be able to get it out because it'll be too complicated and because regulators are too slow to catch up. Now, I think Europe is paying attention. I think there's always the opportunity for regulators to come in and force this kind of openness. I'd rather get a head start on it. I'd rather start building data portability tools within AI and generative AI in particular now, while the market's still evolving, so that when regulators do decide to act, it's less of a retroactive action that just causes tensions and implementation difficulties, and more something that we have been preparing for some time, and we are starting to have the tools ready for already. As always, scoping what data is allowed to be moved here, what data is part of personal data transfers is important, and trust are some of the things that we're most concerned about here. But we've been able to establish some principles for what portability looks like in AI, and I've started getting some companies together to talk about what it would look like to build memory transfer services, conversation history transfer services, other things that I think will help open this up and make sure that the future of AI is one where, while it will still have plenty of problems, hopefully you won't be trapped as one of them. These are just our principles of the last slide. These are pretty straightforward, but it's a matter of how we translated our work into this space. That's the end of my slides. I would love to dig in more on anything that caught anybody's interests or hear more from you about how you've been struggling. I saw the comment in the chat about moving data from Google to Microsoft. One of my biggest frustrations in 3 years on this job has been trying to get Microsoft to come work with us, and they have not. And I don't know how much more I can say to that. I'm trying to get Microsoft to step up here, but for various reasons, I have not been able to get them to the table. It's as I said, one of my biggest frustrations in 3 years. But I hear you.